Hey, beloved listener, and welcome to this spectacle of sound that is Hell If We Know the podcast. I'm Jonathan, and as always, Chris will be with us in a second, but not really. This is in the future. But he was with us a few days ago when we recorded this. It's another good episode, and I know that I always say that, and I know that I usually say that I always say that, but I'm going to keep saying it because I like this podcast, and I like this episode. We talk about things like athletic dogs from the 90s, and I chew jalapeno chips into the microphone a little bit in this one, but that's okay because I was really just trying to even the scoreboard from episode 3 or 4, whenever it was, when Chris was chewing jalapeno chips into the microphone the whole time. So just wanted to be consistent and egalitarian about that. What else? We get in way over our heads on discussion about political systems and such that we really don't know much about. And we finally have an update in our banana talk discussion, so stay tuned. It gets pretty tense. Check it out.
Golden retriever and finds out that he can play basketball.
I mean, that is literally exactly what happens in the movie, though, so that's pretty fair.
I was going to say, there's no better explanation of a movie than that one sentence summary right there.
Actually, I'll challenge that. Okay. But one time I was flipping through TV channels, and one of the Harry Potters was on. I think it was the 4th or the 5th one. And I checked, the info on TV Guide, and it literally said, 3 teenage wizards battle evil warlocks and their own rampaging hormones.
Wait, don't tell me what movie this is. Is this, Wizards of Waverly Place, the movie?
No. I started up this story with telling you what movie it was of.
Oh, I don't remember. What was it? I wasn't listening. At all.
Right, no, that's okay. You just heard Wizards. It was the 4th or 5th Harry Potter. I can't remember which one.
Oh, okay. I guess, if you're describing Harry Potter to somebody who's literally never once heard Harry Potter before, I guess that's about as good as you can go, right? I mean...
Yeah, it's pretty solid, I think. There are a lot of warlocks, I guess, even though they never call them that. And there are a lot of rampaging hormones, even though they don't call them that either.
Rampaging hormones. Rampaging hormones was my favorite Wizards of Waverly Place. I tried there.
Yeah, you tried too much. Should have just stuck with Muse, man.
But let me circle back around to Air Bud. Mm-hmm. Continuing on to the IMDb summary of Air Bud. First of all, it starts with the word diffident, which, I can understand what it means through context, but I can't... if somebody was just, define the word diffident, I'd be like, sorry, dude, I don't know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't know if I've heard that one.
It's definitely a word that I've heard before. I'm confident in that, but I couldn't give you more beyond that. Except for that the IMDb page on the Air Bud movie, original, 1997, says as follows. Diffident in the wake of his father's death, high schooler Josh Kevin Zagers struggles to adapt to his new home in Washington State. That all changes, however, when he signs up to be the school basketball team's manager and discovers that his pet dog, Bud, a stray golden retriever he took in, can play the sport amazingly well. After Air Bud joins the team, Josh's life brightens considerably until the dog's former owner, Norm Snively, played by Michael...
Norm Snively?
Dude, Norm Snively? Are you kidding? Is there a more sinister name than Norm Snively? First of all, Norm means that he's he ain't cool at all. He's just Norm.
I was going to say, it starts off super innocuous, but then Snively comes in. Makes everything so clear.
Snively sounds like an onomatopoetic word where it's just literally describing what kind of villain he is. He's a Snively villain.
Yeah, I feel like the word Snively as an onomatopoeia is like a villain going, nah. That's the sound Snively makes.
Snarf, 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 snarf. Anyway, Norm Snively is played by Michael Jeter, whoever that is, returns in hopes of reclaiming his pooch. Oh my god. The budget for the... Okay, please guess the budget for this movie, and I'll say higher or lower.
Okay, let me, first I'm gonna have to start from, a place of trying to remember what the average movie budget is, so I'm gonna just guess, $1 million out of nowhere right now.
Okay, it's higher. It's high.
Okay.
It's much higher.
Okay, 20 million.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not that high. Jesus Christ. It's Air Bud, for God's sake.
Sorry.
Their main character was a dog. They didn't have to pay him anything.
Right. It's 4 million.
Okay, let me just go ahead and tell you.
Okay, yeah.
The budget for this movie was $3 million US dollars. $3 million for the movie Air Bud. Oh
they definitely got their money's worth out of that though. Like that's such a huge success.
I was gonna say, can I tell you the box office return for this movie?
Please do.
$27.7 million US dollars for the original Air Bud in 1997.
Right. Granted, that's almost 4 times what they spent, which I don't know if that's like standard, but that's definitely, I would take it.
No, dude, isn't that 7 times 3 is 21, right?
My bad. So I was thinking
7 times 4
already.
is 28. So it's almost 7.5 times what they spent on the movie. Again, their main character was a dog. They could have paid him 4 bacon strips worth of monies, and he would have been down DTBG, down to bacon strip. That was the wrong acronym, but you understand what I'm saying.
Down to bacon grip.
He would have been down to bacon strip.
Right.
Oh my god.
I mean, they probably had to pay like 10 different handlers and stuff and like trainers and everything.
Probably,
but I'm sure none of them get
right.
paid nearly as much as like an actual like movie star would.
No. And you know what's even sadder is that for sure every dog who played Air Bud is 100% dead right now. Like dead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very, very dead.
Dead as they come.
As dead as any dead animal who has ever died. And the follow-up to Air Bud, which is, do you want to guess what the title of the sequel to Air Bud is?
Can you tell me the sport and I'll guess the title?
Oh, God. Okay, yes, this is a good game right here. The sport is football, like American football.
Oh, I know this one. It's a golden receiver.
He knows it. The sport is golden receiver.
Yeah,
it got a full point less, like a full 1.0 less on IMDb than its predecessor. Air Bud Golden Receiver got in 1998 got a 4.5 out of 10 by IMDb. Oh god! And do you want me to read you the synopsis here?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Wow. Actually, the budget was Jesus Christ. Sorry for the blasphemy in this Hell If We Know podcast, but okay. Do you remember the budget for the original?
It was like $3.5 million.
It was $3 million. The budget for the sequel was $11 million.
Jesus. That's like 4 times as much, which is...
And
that's probably what I was thinking of earlier when I said 4 times as much. I was thinking of the information I didn't have yet.
Most likely, I would tend to agree with that. Right. It says, teenager Josh, again played by Kevin Zegers, just became the legal owner of his basketball-playing dog, Buddy. But now Buddy is playing football, too. It sure has. Yeah. Thanks to the veterinarian Patrick Sullivan, which is a guy I knew in college, who happens to be the boyfriend of Josh's mom. Ooh. Unfortunately, Josh and Patrick don't get along too well. But when a couple of Russians, it's always the Russians, isn't it? It is. When a couple of Russians, played by Nora Dunn and Perry Anzelotti, see Buddy playing on TV and decide to kidnap him for the circus, the two must band together to find the dog and save him. How ridiculous does this get with a budget of $11 million? I can't even count to 11 million.
So like Soviet villains come to America to kidnap a dog for the circus. That's the plot of this movie.
So not only is it against PETA, it's against America.
Exactly. Well, that's why they had so much money for it. The government probably subsidized it.
You're probably right.
Propaganda for the children.
It was all about the Red Scare at this point.
Right. Was it
1998 was a dark year.
Yeah, almost a decade after the end of the Cold War, right?
Hey, fear is penetrating in generations.
That's true. Also, I think we're like well on our way back to Cold War territory now, so whatever, right?
Putin ain't got nothing on us.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely got, like, a lot on us since he controls our president now and has clearly demonstrated that he can infiltrate pretty much any computer system. I don't know exactly. I don't know enough about technology.
So maybe you can explain this to me, because, like, I haven't been keeping up with the news in, like, the last 2 days, but I heard something along the lines of something along the lines of the Russians hacked Pokemon Go and somehow that won them the election. That won Donald Trump the election. Did you not hear this?
I didn't. I mean, I heard there was another thing they hacked, but like I
Okay.
didn't pay attention to what it was. So it was Pokemon Go though.
Yeah, so apparently, like, and this, like, to my uneducated brain, which holds no other information than, like, these, like, headlines that I saw a couple of times.
Yeah.
The headline that I saw sold the general sentiment that during the time of the election, which was also during the, like, peak of Pokemon Go, the Russians hacked Pokemon Go to somehow infiltrate voters and to somehow guide voters into voting for Donald Trump. Again, I don't know if this is right. I don't know what sort of truth this holds, but this is a headline that I saw multiple times today, and it's a hashtag that I saw spreading all over Twitter. And let me tell you, the memes about this Pokemon Go Vladimir Putin hack were fire. I saw some great Pikachu Vladimir Putin memes today, and that's about all you can hope for in a scandal between the Russian government and Vladimir Putin and Pikachu.
I mean, like, I haven't considered the different things I would hope for in that situation until this very moment. But off the top of my head, yeah, those are the things I guess I would hope for.
Like, if I'm gonna ask for any two world powers to collaborate or to corroborate on something, it's gonna be Japan and Vladimir Putin, specifically communism and Pikachu. I just don't think there's a better mesh between two ideologies than gotta catch them all and gotta enslave them all.
Well, communism isn't about slavery. Let's make this abundantly clear. Capitalism is more prone towards slavery than communism is.
So I get that somebody who lives in a capitalist society would say that and would have no consequences in saying such a thing. But I think somebody who lives in a communist society and would say something like, oh, we're all slaves to the government, man, would probably be shot down in saying such a thing. And the rest of us capitalists would be like, yeah, man, you're totally right. Like, Vladimir Putin's just got you all under his thumb, man. You're all part of the machine, man. You're all a cog in the machine, man.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know enough about communism, but for me, it depends entirely on the dictator. Like, certain dictators in a communist regime would certainly make it that way.
But it's literally never happened once. Like a successful communist regime, and that's what it is, a regime, and not a like, you know, a ruling. Regime has a bad connotation to it. There's never been a successful communism regime, or else we would hear about it, or else we might convert to it or consider converting to it.
Oh, we would never consider converting to it. There are lots of things America sees would work and doesn't consider.
America wouldn't consider converting to it, but like average people who are not just like your typical like college hipsters might consider converting to it.
That's true. I don't know. I think you're probably right. I think part of me is I am not smart enough to differentiate as well as I should between communism and socialism. And I know for a fact socialism is a functioning and viable thing. And I think capitalism specific, because if we're talking about capitalism versus communism, those are two different things, because communism is government, capitalism is finance.
Yeah, I was going to say,
for me, socialism is the counterpart, and socialism certainly doesn't cause slavery. I'd say capitalism is what's more prone to slavery than socialism, although communism is a different thing, I guess. I don't know enough to really say that.
This is the future that liberals want.
Yeah, it is. I'm advocating.
Is for us to discuss the positives of socialism on a podcast in 2017.
A podcast that's kind of about religion, too.
A podcast that's kind of about religion in 2017.
Yeah.
We're
making it real, man.
Where our main story is that's right. This is the future that liberals want, is for us to discuss the positives of both socialism and Airbud Golden Receiver on the radio waves of the 2017 world.
Yeah. Although I think our thesis at this point is that socialism is the good guy and Airbud was evil propaganda to try and prevent socialism.
Listen, I think Airbud himself, no matter what form he took, Airbud is an ideology. Airbud is not a person. Airbud transcends. He's obviously not a person. He's a dog. But
he has personhood in a sense.
He has but that's what I'm saying, is that Airbud transcends something that we all hold dear to us. Airbud is not a person. Airbud is not a dog. Airbud is not an athletic dog, although he is that. But he's something more. Airbud is more than just an athletic dog. He transcends something that we can conceive as humans. Airbud is against the sickle and hammer. Airbud is against the Red Scare. Airbud is pro-America, but the second movie in his franchise being American football. Who can argue with that? Airbud
That's
is
true.
pro-America. He's pro-freedom. He's pro-football. He's pro-calling it football instead of American football. And therefore, he's pro-calling it soccer instead of football, which I don't fully agree with. But as an American, you got to stand by.
No, I actually like soccer over football.
Me too. And yeah, I'll be honest, like, in an environment that I am right now, a lot of people from different cultural backgrounds discussing sometimes football and soccer and different sports. When an American or a Canadian calls it football, I'm just like, be more clear and just call it soccer, because everybody knows what soccer means. But like, if you say football and you're an American or Canadian, people are going to be like, wait, what do you mean again? And that just kind of bothers me.
Yeah. And I agree, like, calling American football was a dumb idea. I think hand egg sounds stupid, but it's a better name for it.
But
we should come up with something else entirely. I agree completely. But I think soccer is actually a really good name for soccer, because a lot of people don't even know this. Like, people get so upset about it. Soccer is literally just an abbreviation for associated football. The sock in associated is where we get soccer from.
Wow, really?
So it's a perfectly reasonable term. It sounds good. It, like, for some reason, phonetically, it fits the image that comes up in my head. Maybe that's just a societal thing. But, like, yeah, soccer is a really great name for it. So I don't have any reason to want to call it football.
Yeah, and you're right. Well, like, when somebody says soccer, there's no doubt in your mind what somebody's talking about.
Exactly.
Except for the thing that comes to your head is, okay, this person is an American when somebody says soccer instead of football. That's the only like maybe downside that somebody gets to saying soccer instead of football. But when somebody says football and you're unsure of their accent, you haven't asked them where they're from yet, and this happens more than you might guess as an American.
Yeah.
There is some discrepancy as to what you might be talking about. And if we all just agreed to say soccer, listen, America's done a lot of things wrong in the past year. What we haven't done wrong is called it soccer. Let's just all get on board with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can forget the Trump stuff. We can forget the millions of rape accusations and terrible things that have come into the news recently. If we all just call it soccer, things might be a little easier.
It might put a little bit less tension on society,
might
help
put a little
alleviate
less
some of
tension.
these other issues.
It might stomp down the sickle and hammer again. This might be the second coming of Airbud Golden Receiver, is what I'm saying.
Airbud 10 is going to be like Airbud dog pun about communism. I couldn't think of anything quick enough.
Airbud, okay, we got it.
Yeah.
Red, okay, Star Wars reference. You know how in Star Wars, I think it's 5, episode 5, they're all like, Red 1 going into battle, Red 5 going into battle.
Yeah.
It's gonna be Airbud, Red Rum, and it's gonna be about a drunk Air Force dog, constantly referencing The Shining, and and he's gonna fight communism.
Well, I like that the one thing we were originally trying to go for was a pun about a dog. And you completely neglected that.
Yeah, okay. Golden Receiver, there's nothing better, really, that can be said about Golden Receiver.
Yeah.
Do we want to see what the rest of the of the Airbud movies are called, or do we want to just move on?
I think we want to move on. But before we move on, I do also, we recently spoke about soccer. Attentive listeners will remember this. We recently spoke about soccer, and we recently spoke about our nation.
That's right.
And I think it's only appropriate that we take a moment of silence at this point of the podcast to mourn the fact that American men national team did not qualify for the World Cup for the first time since the 80s.
Yeah, I heard about this, and I almost couldn't care less, but I'll take a I'll take a moment of silence for this.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Hey, goodbye. All right, are you doing the sign of the cross now? Because I'm doing the sign of the cross. I think it's appropriate.
So I was sort of going for the what's that Leonardo DiCaprio cocaine and prostitutes movie?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street. I was kind of going for that hum, but I heard you going for a different hum.
Oh, my bad.
And
sorry.
About halfway through, we parted ways, and that's fine with me. But just know that our sentiment was true, and our sentiment was with and for America.
Yeah.
No matter what we were humming.
Yeah. The men of this great team that haven't been great in a while appreciate and know that our hearts are with them.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. So I have a few administrative details to address at the beginning of this episode.
Administrative details. Nothing sounds sexier than administrative details. Lay it on me.
Yeah, so I feel like we've started to get responses to episodes and things, and one of the things we've been looking forward to is including reactions and stuff in our current episodes. So I wanted to include an update. It's time for some more Banana Talk, people.
Oh, Banana Talk. Let's do it.
Yeah, a good friend of mine who will remain anonymous because I didn't do that right. Anonymous.
No.
Anonymous because I didn't ask if she wanted to be named in this or not. But a good friend of mine was listening to Banana Talk episode and sent me this video that explained the whole monkeys eating bananas phenomenon. And actually, we are all wrong. They just don't peel it at all. They just bite straight through.
No, they don't. Do they really?
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. Like, what other fruit? Like, they eat mangoes and stuff. They eat all these things.
Yeah, we were talking
they just
about how
bite
they
straight
only
through.
eat mangoes.
Well, yeah, the thing is they wouldn't, like, normally eat bananas, but, like, if you gave them one, which happens occasionally, like, they just bite straight through.
Dude, everything we know is a lie. They just bite straight through?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is good news for us. The people, who are talking about how monkeys don't peel bananas from the bottom. That couldn't possibly be the case because it's just un-American. And as we all know, monkeys are, if anything, American.
If anything at all. They're indigenous to the US of A, baby.
Right. The reason that we should get rid of Columbus Day is not because Columbus was a genocidal maniac, although that is a good reason, but because monkeys don't deserve the praise that we give them.
I really thought you were just going to say because I had no idea where that could have gone. And honestly, I didn't even pay attention to where it went. I liked where it went up till that point and was satisfied.
Wow. This is crazy to me. So monkeys just bite straight through.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that's what we should do, even though obviously, no, we shouldn't. Humans are experts in the things that humans do for the most part, so we should be proud of that.
The reason that we're at the top of the evolutionary chain is because we don't throw poop at each other for the most part, and we eat bananas the right way. Again, for the most part.
Right. Some people eat them from the bottom up, which we have clearly determined at this point is wrong.
Right. Again, please vote for us for Banana Talk of the Year award on the Podcast Awards in 2018.
Yes, thank you for your consideration. And thank you to Anonymous Friend who has given us more fodder for the fire of our Banana Talk. That might be the end of it. I don't know if we're going to have a lot more to talk about in the future.
We'll come back to it. There will certainly be opportunities for us to speak more about bananas in the future, but I think we can close that door right now. We can at least shut it but not lock it.
Yeah, I like that. Segment number 2 is we missed an episode last week, and I want to address that and say that we are sorry. I'm sorry. Chris, are you sorry?
I'm sorry too. Wait, listen, I had break all last week, and so like there were a couple things that happened last week. You know, neither of us really quite could match up the time. The 13 hours time difference is a little difficult to schedule a podcast around, and that's not an excuse, but it is a reason.
Yeah, and I realized sort of late that was also the first week that we didn't have queued up episodes pre-recorded. Like, we had finally caught up to real-time recording, and we immediately messed that up and weren't able to record on time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we do apologize for that. And you know what? If you want to donate to our Patreon and consider sponsoring the podcast, it will help us prevent future slip-ups like this.
We don't have a Patreon.
No, but let's talk about that. Maybe off mic sometime.
If you want to PayPal me money, my email is c.auber@yahoo.com.
That's not even your email.
It is. It's one of my emails.
Oh, yeah. It was like your high school email or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot better than my high school email, honestly, so good for you. I went through a long phase of immaturity where I refused to take on, like, even vaguely professional-sounding identities on the internet.
Good for you.
Yeah, and that's why my Twitter handle is still @FunkmasterJFree.
And let it forever remain such.
I don't know, man. Jonathan Pear is creeping up in prominence.
Yeah, you might want to sync your Instagram and Facebook and Twitter just so that it's all the same so people can always contact you at the same @ sign.
So that's what I'm thinking about, but I'm also too lazy to worry about it right now. Okay, what else did we want to talk about? Do you want to rate us on iTunes, listeners? That'd be cool.
Rate us on iTunes so that we can raise our stakes on the charts, and people will find us who don't know about us, who aren't our Facebook friends already, and who aren't our moms.
Right, exactly. Like I was listening to a lot of podcasts recently because I've been traveling a lot, and I realized like a lot of them ask you to rate them on iTunes, and I thought, oh, we should do that too. And if you rate us on iTunes and you send us an email at hellifweknowpodcast@gmail.com showing us your rating, we will respond with some sort of gift of appreciation.
Yeah, we'll give you a shout out.
Yeah, maybe something even better than that, but definitely at least a shout out. Probably nothing better than that, but at least a shout out for sure.
I'll send you a shout out from across the world in the future, because I guarantee wherever you're listening to, I'm further in the future than you are, because I'm 13 hours ahead of the East Coast of the United States, and I sure as hell don't have any listeners not in the East Coast of the United States. So there you go.
Yeah. So smooth transition. Back to Job, right?
Back to Job. Yeah, 2.0. Let's go.
Yeah. Cool. For those of you that didn't listen to
can I give you a previously on Job, the kind of thing?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
okay.
Please do. Can I do the and then you'll be like, Chris said blah blah blah, but like, and then you know how they'll play the clip from the previous episode. And you'll narrate both me and you.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Previously on Job. I mean on Hell If We Know.
Previously on Hell If We Know's Job. So basically, Mike Pence is playing.
The worst.
So basically, Mike Pence is playing the devil, and Mike Pence challenges God to see if he can persuade Job, who's God's most faithful citizen of the world at this point, into betraying him. And Job remains faithful and steadfast in his beliefs in God. But the devil really tries his to do the best to swing Job towards his side of the pendulum. And but Job does his best. He remains a true American hero, and basically Job's entire life gets destroyed, but he is allowed to remain a perfect citizen and believer of God, and that is supposed to make you a happy Christian, I think. We don't know.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time in the last episode talking about how none of it makes any sense. And there's just like, all it seems to be is like, yeah, the world sucks sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's true. Like, that's the only message we got out of it. And I don't have a lot more to say about it, honestly. But we talked some big game in the last episode about like, yeah, we want to follow up on this and really have some better ideas. So we're going to try, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So yeah, there's a few things I wanted to clarify sort of from the last episode. One is that we mentioned... Or I mentioned Allison Robinson, a great Southern Baptist preacher in Texas. And one thing I listened to her say about Job, about how the reality of the despair of Job sort of reached her when she was struggling with something in her life. And I want to clarify / correct myself a little bit there, because I re-listened to that. It's on YouTube, actually. If you search, I don't remember what it's called, but we'll put a link in the description probably. Yeah, if you go to this video, she talks for a long time about... She sort of compares Job's story to the story of Abraham and Isaac. So this is the story where God says to Abraham, hey, Abraham, you've been so great, and I'm smelling what you're stepping in, but it's time for you to sacrifice things to me because that's our way. And this time it's going to be your son Isaac, who you love more than everything in the world, because he was a gift for me that demonstrated your faithfulness and your greatness, and you're going to kill him for my glory. So go up to Mount Moriah and kill your son. What's up?
That's a real bummer.
It is a bummer, but Abraham's like, yeah, that makes sense. So he goes up to the mountain, and his son is like, hey, where's the goat? And Abraham's like, don't sweat it. And they go up there.
Ah!
Yeah. And he puts them on, I guess, like a rock or some wood or something. He ties them down, whatever you do with the sacrifice.
It's a big rock.
Yeah. And he raises up his blade. Excuse me, I had a cough, obviously. He raises up his blade. Yeah, a little throat boy going on. And he raises up his blade. I've said that 4 times now, I think. And he's about to kill him. And then God's like, no, don't do that. And God sends an angel. And the angel grabs his hand and is like, no, you're good. And here's a goat. Just kidding. We just wanted to see what you would do. Good work. And that's how the end of the story goes.
That is quite a story that we need to do a whole episode on, because as many times as I've heard that story, and I know that that's like pretty much all there is to it, right. I really want to do a deep dive into that and see just how hesitant Abraham was, because it's surprisingly unhesitant, if that's a word.
Yeah, it's definitely the perfect word to use regardless of its reality. But yeah, it's I agree completely. We should dive way into that one for an episode. But for the purpose of this episode, I want to bring up that Allison Robinson compared this story with Job's story in a really interesting way because I'd never compared the two before. But what was amazing is that in Abraham's story, God sees Abraham and how well Abraham is doing and how much Abraham honors God and says, okay, we're going to take everything away from you. But then at the last second, it says that Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. He didn't need to make the sacrifice because his faith and his unflinching commitment to do what God had asked of him counted, and that was good. So then why wasn't Job's faith credited to him as righteousness? What's the difference between those stories?
Job was arguably the most faithful and the most righteous, at least of that time period.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. You could certainly argue about whether or not any of the Abraham story is true, but the Job story is certainly just a legend. For one thing, it resembles other stories that were circulating in that area at the time. For another thing, it literally starts out by saying that Job was absolutely perfect, and that was the end of the story. So even just from that, we know from what God reveals to us about humanity that nobody's perfect. This, like, the Job story is a legend. It's supposed to teach us something, even though that's obviously not clear at all. Like, it's not a real story. I don't think it was ever intended to be that way.
But it made it into the canonized Bible, so doesn't that make it as real as any other story in the Bible?
It makes the message real. However, I would say a lot of stories in the Bible get treated as real when that was never even the intention. The messages of them are true. The messages of them are important.
That feels like a huge oversight. The four, what is it, 4 people who wrote the Bible were like, they'll get it. They'll figure it out.
Well, the thing is, I think that it was probably not on their minds that people would take these things so literally. You know?
Oh,
the message for sure.
You never said for 1 second in the whole Bible that this shouldn't be taken literally.
Well, it's like in Native American folklore when they say, the coyote was a human that walked around and, did all these crazy human things. They're never like, the coyotes used to be humans. Or, there's this one father coyote that was a human and was, the wiliest of all the animals. There's just, they picked an animal as a symbol for, these stories that are symbols for messages that they have. There's not this presupposition that, coyotes used to be humans in the story. That's how a lot of legends and faiths and things originate, is that this idea of that we have these stories as a people that resemble stories that other peoples have too, and they sort of define us because of the messages that are in these stories are what inspire us and sort of tell us about ourselves, regardless of whether or not they happen literally. They're almost condensations into more literary ways of saying what happened literally, just in a more entertaining way.
Okay, but I wish so why does everybody sort of look at Native American folklore and they're like, yeah, but nobody really believes that. Everybody knows that it's just sort of like a folktale. And nobody looks at the Bible and is like, yeah, but nobody really believes that. Everybody knows that it's just a folktale.
Well, that's the other thing. A lot of Jewish communities, the very demographic with which these stories originated, don't take them as literal stories. Jewish tradition doesn't frequently hold these stories as literal. It's all about the meaning of the stories. If you talk to rabbis and to Jewish people, in my experience, that's a message that's been conveyed to me a lot. And if that's the group that these stories came from, I don't know why Christians have suddenly, over the past few hundred years, I don't know when this started, been and we have to believe this is literally the case or we're all going to burn in hell.
Yeah, and I think we're both in agreement there, but we need to have the voice of somebody who really does believe that, because I'm sure that
you're right.
There's no way that every person who believes that is stupid, you know?
Yeah, no, it is crazy because it's not a matter of stupidity. It's a matter of being informed a certain way and never considering the alternatives.
Which, in my opinion, is kind of one of the definitions of stupidity. It's never considering another option, even though you're a human, you're of age, you gotta know that there's other options out there besides the one that's your own.
Because I know, there are people I know who, the thing is, that's the way they get informed. It's not they get informed that this is what we know. They get informed that this is what we know, and then even more, assertively and abrasively, this is the only way to know, and anything else you should disregard. Like, that's very dominant ideology in a lot of, like, American Christianity, at least.
But when only that one group of people even acknowledges that fact, and no other group of people in your entire life, not in school, none of any of your friends outside of school or outside of church or anything, when nobody else acknowledges that fact or that story in the same way that you and your group do, don't you just naturally sort of question it and be like, maybe there's another reason
that is one thing
that
a lot of people do, and that's what I think you should do. But the other reaction, or the other dominant reaction, would be to say, okay, I was taught that when people disagree with this, that it's wrong, and that I need to really make sure that I stay true to this. And then you double down, you form your own bubble, you get this tunnel vision, and so you just close yourself off.
I guess this is sort of like what I'm planning to do when I have a kid, which is to teach this kid that no matter what anybody says, there is, for certain, a number between 6 and 7 called flogum. And
that's the grossest name you could have thought of.
Even if your teacher tells you that you're wrong, even if all the math tests that you get bad grades on, even if all the other kids tell you that you're wrong, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you are wrong. And if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flogum 7, you are correct. So I guess if I told my kids that there was 100% certainty that anybody who tells you otherwise is lying, then they're wrong, and that they're trying to, incorporate you into a terrible ideology that's totally counter to everything that I stand for. I guess that's kind of comparable, isn't it? Or is
that's actually a really good analogy. And I would take it even a step further to say, like, it's not even just your parents saying this, because for, like, that could, like, really mess you up, and probably you'd have, like, a really rough rebellion in your teen years when you begin to realize, like, oh my God, there is no flogum. But I think, like, it's even harsher with religion, because then it's not just your parents, it's your parents and the person your parents look up to and see as almost infallible. It's your parents saying, like, this is what the pastor tells us, this is what the preacher tells us, and this is what God tells the preacher. So there's, like, this incredible hierarchy of pressure where you're like, there's no way this could be wrong. It's so difficult. Like, that's why good parenting is so significant to, like, developing a healthy faith. Is because, like, if they put too much pressure on, like, infallibility and inerrancy and on their experience of, I guess, what they would call facts, and if they emphasize that to you in a way that makes it so that you can't develop your own thoughts, for one thing, you don't even have any faith. If you just say, like, my parents always told me this because their pastor always told them that, and there's this hierarchy of pressure telling me this is what you have to believe because this is the infallible truth, that's not faith. That's just succumbing to what you can't begin to bring yourself to deny. If you have to question it, you have to begin to reason with yourself about these things, and then come up with what God reveals to you through that.
So we're totally in agreement here, and we're kind of just, like, circle jerking around at how right we are. But
yeah.
So I think
because we're so great and smart.
Because we're so smart, and, like, we're the only ones who get it.
Right,
but,
and we have this nice tunnel vision circle going, just like the guys we were just complaining about, because we've got our own little bubble now.
But I guess, so what we need here either is somebody who vehemently disagrees with us and has reasons, or a topic change.
Yeah, topic change is probably good. So the point is, Job, in my opinion, there's no way it's a true story. It's a legend that was circulating in multiple cultures at that time.
Okay.
And the pretense of the character of Job is impossible, and even that should be strong enough evidence in itself. But then the scene with Mike Pence and God just doesn't seem consistent with anything else I see anywhere in faith tradition or in scripture. It reads like a legend. That scene does.
Yeah, it's a little too like, it fits too well with other stories of folklore and things like that, things that are passed down, like, orally from generation to generation. Like, there's another story about the devil and God where what is it? It's the one where God says, like, do not put the Lord thy God to the test.
Oh, that's the 40 days in the wilderness with Jesus.
Yeah, it's that one. And so it's the same kind of thing there, where it's like, it's just a little too good of a story to fit the rest of the Bible. literally at least, and I don't quite see how anybody could read that as a factual historical document.
Right. Yeah, and it's easy for us to say that too, but I mean, like, and back to what you were saying, we need to have someone in this conversation who does, because they can tell us how they believe it, and that'd be probably a really cool conversation. So yeah, for the purposes of the rest of this podcast, though, we're going to treat Job as if it is a legend, and we're going to treat the message of Job no differently because of it.
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool.
Well, so we were talking about what Job means and the fact that in the end of Job, it actually does end, like, air quotes, happily, because he does get, like, another family, and he does get, like, all of his stuff back, his like, material possessions back. And even,
like, doubled, right?
Yeah, and even double, but again, like, is a new wife going to replace your old wife if you know that the only reason your old wife left was because that you remained faithful to your God and then he killed her anyway?
Yeah, no, that'd still be terrifying. But I think also looking at this again as not a real story, since the wife has no character in the story, it's like 100%, also because of the culture about women and children at the time, it's just a possession. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they were just like other... You're right. I guess I'm thinking a little too like 21st century with this, but at the time, like, they were no different than like his house or his cattle, you know?
Yeah, just hopefully the only one of those three that he had sex with.
Who knows? The Bible was full of surprises.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, so... Yeah, I wanted to clarify that the idea of Alison Robinson was comparing it specifically with the story of Abraham. I wanted to clarify that it doesn't seem to be a true story according to what's given to us in Scripture. Fly just landed in my coffee.
That sucks.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the meat of the story, because I think if we're going to get anything out of it, we really need to look at more aspects of it. And it's a really long book, and there's a bunch of stuff in the middle that seems like dull and repetitive that's actually got some like pretty significant points in there. Oh geez, it does suck. It keeps going back down in there. The fly in the coffee. Anyway, so I want to say, we mentioned, I think very briefly, that his friends come up to him and talk about like, oh, blah, 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 you're blah, 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 blah. And Job's like, no, and cries. Right? Was that pretty much a spot on like, reiteration?
Almost exactly, yeah, word for word, I'd say. So his friends, just like his wife and his kids, try to dissuade him from remaining faithful to God, because they're like, dude, we're getting all these warts, we're getting all these boils and all over our body, and like all of our cattle and people are dying. Please just like renounce your faith towards God, and like all of our lives will be better for it. And Job doesn't obey them.
Wrong. Sorry, that was very terse. That's not what his friends do, actually, though. His friends, yeah, they're not afflicted. Like, his servants and his household and all of that is afflicted.
Boy, his wife and kids are, and his...
Yeah, his wife and kids are, but not his friends, because there's a significance to the friends not being afflicted.
Okay.
What they do is they come up, and each one of those friends represents, like, a certain cultural understanding of, like, God's justice at that time. Because the whole thing is, like, this story goes into we're supposed to go into the story with the pretense that God delivers goodness to people who are good, and God delivers, retribution upon the people who are evil, right? Okay. That's, like, the cultural understanding of justice at that time. So the friends come up, and they basically make the argument. Each one of them presents it slightly differently, but each one of them makes the argument that, like, okay, you must have done something wrong, because or else God wouldn't be doing this to you. And the thing is, Job's really struggling, because he's like, no, I didn't do something wrong. I'm literally blameless because I'm this made up person who's somehow blameless. And the friends are like, well, you're just wrong about that, because that's how God works. And then there's a fourth friend who sort of begins to have a different idea, but it still doesn't quite work right. And the fourth friend is like, oh, there must be something in your future that God's preparing you for. Like, because of you would be unable to handle this event in your future. You would not handle it justly, having not been through these fires or whatever. And that's another sort of popular ideology around, like, the wickedness we see in the world is like, because that's really what the question of this book is. It's not like, what did Job do? Because it says clearly Job didn't do anything. And the question is just like, how does God allow wickedness in the world? Which is like, wow, what a great question. That's something
it's like the age-old question: why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. or even just like at all. But yeah, I mean, especially to good people. You're right. So that's the fourth idea, sort of, is that like, even though I can't remember the difference between the first three, they're all pretty much the same. The second/fourth idea is that like it'll prepare you for your future tribulations or whatever. But Job still doesn't really accept that one. He's just kind of like, yeah, I don't like that, which is fair because he's in a bad place, and it's not, that's not how you console your friend. You don't. If you had your entire family die and your house is burned down, I wouldn't go up to you and be like, God is doing this to prepare you for a worse thing coming in the future. That wouldn't help you. You wouldn't feel good.
Yeah, I get it, Job.
Yeah. So Job's like, nah, this isn't good. And so that's like a million chapters right there. It's just that conversation. And then there's another million chapters where Job's like, no, this is terrible. I don't deserve this. I'm cursing the day I was born. God, you make no sense. And there's like a million chapters of that. And then at the very end, Job demands that God comes down and like explains God's self to him. And so then God does that, but not really very well. But here's what happens. Is that then God takes Job on this like nice little tour of the universe. I'm picturing like sort of an astral projection kind of thing.
Okay, I can get
slash
behind that.
mixed with like Peter Pan when they're like flying across the universe. Picture that.
Second star to the right and straight on till morning, Job.
Exactly. And so they go all over the world and they see all these creatures and all these events happening and like cultures that the Jews wouldn't have like known existed. They're just like making up, which is cool that they're actually like including other cultures, because the dominant ideology at the time was that there's like just Judaism and like the neighboring cultures around that. They don't realize there's this whole other world that has like huge diversity at this point. But yeah, so that's cool that they did like at least make up some cultures to throw in there. But yeah, so he's going all over the world and like seeing all these different things and the intricacies and the dynamism of it all happening at once. And then at the end, God's like, yeah, I think you can handle it. Think like this is my day job, like do you think you get it? Like, are you prepared to react to it appropriately now? Like, do you think you could do better? And I don't like that at all, because I think that's a stupid thing for God to say.
It's really inconsistent with God's whole like thing too, which is like being an enigma. He reveals himself a little too much, almost like the part when he reveals his to that one guy through the rock.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would say the problem with this one is that God doesn't really reveal anything. Literally, God just says like, "Here's the world, deal with it." Like that's not a revelation at all. Like, if God took me around the world and showed me every intricacy that was involved with it, and God was like, what do you think? I'd be like, that was like a couple hours of my life that I'll never get back. Like, thanks for showing me stuff, I guess, but like, and maybe this is the naive perspective of someone who hasn't seen the full intricacies of every aspect of the universe. But I don't think I would really get a whole lot out of that.
Yeah, you wouldn't even understand what you don't even understand.
Exactly. But apparently Job understands something, and so Job's just like, yeah, I know, you're right. But then there's this grand finale, sort of, though, where God shows Job these two beasts. It doesn't name them, but it's like the descriptions are consistent with the like mythical beasts at the time, the Leviathan and the Behemoth. And it's just these massive, like, powerful and dangerous things that like could destroy everyone if they wanted, essentially. And God sort of says to Job, like, yeah, these two things are like so deadly, but they're not evil. They're part of my good creation that I've made for all of humanity and the rest of the universe.
But I promise to keep them under wraps, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, like, this is the top secret portion of the tour. Like, don't tell anyone. And that's just kind of how it ends. And then God, like we said, just restores twofold everything to Job. But yeah. That's the full story, though. I wanted to put that out first and foremost. Is like, that's the parts we left out the first go round.
Yeah, so there's a lot of the story that we did leave out. Job is a long section of the Bible, and there's a whole lot of it that's not mentioned and that one might argue doesn't matter as much, but I think when you read it in the entirety of his whole live's context, it does sort of shift your opinion of story of Job.
Yeah, but going back to the question, I guess, of the book, is like, why does wickedness occur and why does evil exist and all that, which is relevant given a lot of what's going on in the world right now. And it's also always relevant because there's always wickedness and evil going on in the world. It just feels more prominent now because we're so aware of it and plugged into all of it. And it's probably been exponentialized by the fact that we're aware of it and plugged into all of it. But anyway, I don't know. What do you get from that, Chris? As one of our resident experts, what do you get from the world tour and the Leviathan and the Behemoth that explains wickedness?
I guess just that, like, I guess the final product here is Job becomes more wise and rewarded because he sees so much of the universe and because he is opened to the idea that there are so many things that could be worse, like, for example, the Leviathan and the Behemoth. And so, I don't know, I'm grasping at straws here, but maybe go see as much of the world as you can and go see as much of the, like, dark depths of hell that you never thought you would even go to as you can, so that you can realize that maybe back at home on your farm in the land of Uz, it's not that bad. That would be my takeaway from this. And maybe even if you go through hell, you'll be rewarded twofold in the end, just like Job was. It may not be the kind of paradise that you were hoping for, but in the end, it'll all be good, just like it was for our boy Job.
Yeah, I think that's a valid interpretation for sure. There's stuff in there I haven't thought about. Mine is that kind of just like a begrudging, like, screw it all kind of thing. Like, I think, like, not like, I think the for me, the point of this story is to say, like, you don't get it. Like, because it's addressing a presupposition at the time that God works this certain way and God's justice functions this way for humanity. And for me, it seems like the point of the story is like, no, you're wrong. You don't get it. You know, it doesn't actually answer the question. It just says, like, your answer is wrong.
Right. No matter what it is, you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Which is not helpful at all. It's very frustrating. But there are a couple, like, I was doing some research, and there are a couple of, like, there's a school of thought, or not a school of thought, a school of thinking, fish. I guess. A school of fish called theodicy. And within theodicy, there are schools of thought. And there's basically, like, different ways of reasoning with the existence of evil in a world created by an omnipotent and all-loving God. And some of them, like, involve the fact that, like, okay, we either have to say that God is maybe not omnipotent, which is something that Job sort of struggles with, like, okay, if God is letting this happen to me, maybe God doesn't have the power to stop it like we think God does.
Ooh,
that's one answer.
That would throw a monkey wrench into the entire situation of religion.
Yeah. And one thing we know for sure is the monkey wrench would bite through the skin of a monkey banana. Or a banana wrench. I think I said that wrong. But anyway. Yeah, so that's one thing. We just define God incorrectly.
Banana wrench was my favorite Foo Fighters song.
Foo Fighters, that's a good one. That'll work. And then the other one that we can take is that God isn't all loving. Which, you know, both of these are incredibly, like, monkey wrenchy for any relationship we have to God from what we think we understand. You know, if God isn't all powerful, then okay, we better be scared because the world is, you know, entropying towards total chaos, and that's just like a scientific fact. And if God isn't all loving, then God could be causing the world to entropy towards total chaos. And there's nothing, like, there's no goodness underlying all of our existence.
Either way, there's not a lot we can do about it.
Yeah. So those are two reactions, two ideas within theodicy that I don't know if those count as, like, full-fledged schools of theodicy. I don't know if school of theodicy is even a phrase. I'm pretty new to theodicy. But I don't know if that counts as, like, full-fledged theodicies because, you know, it redefines God, which I think the point of theodicy is to understand wickedness without redefining God. But the other two big ones are the Augustinian theodicy and the Iranian theodicy, or Irenaean. I don't know how to say the second one. I think it's Irenaean, or Irenaean. It could be anything. Anyway, the Augustinian one is that God created a perfect world and then people made it imperfect, which is kind of like popular idea that a lot of us sort of have, is like, because humans aren't perfect and because we have this sort of agency to interact with things and affect things, we're going to bring our imperfection to everything. And, you know,
it's the whole idea of original sin.
Exactly. Yeah, that's literally exactly it. And then the Irenaean one, which I'm, like, for sure saying that wrong.
Iranian.
Well, that's the thing, is it's I-R-E. And I think it's Iranian, remember, from episode 3 or whatever?
They prefer to be called Persians.
Persians, right. So the Persian theodicy is that creation is just incomplete. We have this God that is putting us through, like, not putting us through, but that is actively creating the world at all times, because God exists outside of time, and we are aspects of creation. So there's this creation going on around us, and it's incomplete, and perfection is impossible without completion. And so there's this imperfection, and this wickedness is part of our maturation towards completion and perfection.
Yeah,
it's kind of like puberty.
It's exactly like puberty. That's actually the comparison that I was about to make.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Well, so I can't disagree with any of these. Like, they all seem like valid interpretations of a really confusing passage and a really confusing book. And that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah. Wait, what's that from? Shoot. No, don't tell me. Yeah, I got it. Oh, no, Jonathan, no.
Oh, come on, dude.
Do you
want me to give you a hint?
No. Don't give me a hint. I'm so close.
He's got it.
Forrest Gump.
Yes, there we go.
Yes, thank you. I was picking, like, for some reason it felt like an Irish accent when you were doing it, and so I was like trying to think like Babe or something.
I'm not at my best right now. It is 2 a.m, but
yeah, that's fair. Sorry for keeping you up so late. / thanks for staying up so late.
Yeah, no worries on both accounts.
Sweet.
But so how do we wrap this up in sort of a neat little bow that we can allow people to bring home, and like what can people bring home from this?
It's not gonna be a neat bow. It's gonna be the possible bow.
Okay. It's gonna be like when your Uncle Stan wraps up the Christmas presents and puts them under the tree.
Honestly, it's gonna be like when I wrap up the Christmas presents. The point is that we one thing, and I hate this, but the idea, like, you know, God is a mystery and God's ways are mysterious. That is, you know, that's not a satisfying thing to say. It does kind of feel like a cop-out when you say that. Exactly, yeah. And so that's why that's part one of this conclusion. I think there is truth to, like, the idea of, like, if there's this perfect and infinite thing that controls everything, then of course it's beyond our understanding, and there is mystery inherent in that. It's arrogant to think otherwise, which goes back to, I think, you know, beginning to say, like, we know theology and everyone else is wrong, like we were talking back at the beginning of the episode. Like, I think that's super arrogant, because this infinite mysterious thing, there's no way that we're going to understand it completely. Anyway, that's one thing. That's part one, is that God is mysterious and that God's ways are mysterious. But the thing that makes this important, and I think aside from the question of, like, why does wickedness exist, I think the other point that the story makes more subtly is that Job was right. And, like, the way Job handled the situation was right. Because Job didn't do anything wrong, first of all. That's fine. That's not really very important, actually. Job didn't do anything wrong. But then when everyone else was saying, like, no, this is how God exists, this is how God's purposes are enacted throughout the world, so clearly you've done something wrong, Job didn't just accept that. He didn't say, like, I guess I forgot one time when I killed a person. Job was like, no, like, I have this reality that was given to me by God, these experiences that God gave me.
Right, he's done everything right. I can't just
deny that. Exactly, yeah, like, he knows the life and the purpose that God gave him. He knows this. He can't deny that. He can't just refute that to accept the theology of what someone else told him. So he wrestles with it, and he engages with God with it. He says, God, I demand that you explain yourself, because this isn't right, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the point. Because towards the end, it says, it sort of makes it clear that Job was right. Like, I think God says at one point, like, yeah, the friends are wrong and you're right, good work. Like, Job actually handled this situation perfectly, which, you know, Job was such a perfect guy. But that's the message. That's the reaction I feel like matters for us to take away from this story, is that God doesn't make sense, sure, but, like, we should never stop demanding that God explain God's self to us. We should never stop struggling with that. And even if we won't understand what we go in trying to understand, we will come out of that wrestling and that questioning and that doubting and that struggle and that difficulty so much wiser and so much closer to God because of it. And I think that's what makes faith important. That's what makes community and doubt important. Yeah, that's the point of the story for me.
That's exactly the kind of wrap up that I wanted. Was like, it's terrible, but, like, you gotta struggle with it. You gotta ask questions. You gotta, you just gotta rage against the machine, man, and see what comes out of it. And hopefully you'll end up, like you said, a wiser and better person because of it.
Yeah, Yeah, so that's what I got. And I think there's the one of the things Allison Robinson said in her sermon or her presentation or whatever you want to call it, going back to the comparison between Abraham and Job. She says, where the faith of Father Abraham asks, how dare we question God's intentions? The faith of Father Job asks, how dare we not question God's intentions?
Ooh, nice. Yeah, I dig that. Nice job.
Yeah, this was a tough one.
Yeah, this is not an easy passage to get through, but I don't know. Anybody who can even like pretend to explain what they think it means, like props to them. And so therefore, props to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I got a lot of help on this one. Cool. So yeah, if you, dear listener, have qualms with this, or if you just want to say, wow, Jonathan, you're so smart, and send us emails about that,
Dude,
feel
tell
free
him
to
he's
do
smart.
so.
He digs that.
Yeah, I love it, man. I blush so hard every time, and I love blushing.
You're a blushing boy.
Oh,
Hit
boy.
him up at blushingboy@yahoo.gov.
Yahoo.gov. Yeah, but yeah, if you do want to make me blush, or if you want to make me blush in a bad way by telling me I'm wrong, I love both of those. And you can do so at hellifweknowpodcast@gmail.com or at hellifweknow on Instagram and Twitter, and hellifweknow at Facebook for any questions, comments, corrections, or suggestions.
Do exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure to include blushing emojis in every message you send.
Absolutely.
Yep. Anything else for the good of the order?
I think that's all I got for the listeners today.
Cool.